So, on Tuesday afternoon, the news broke that Sony and Disney's miraculous partnership to bring Spider-Man into the MCU was now at an end. All over Twitter, MCU stans were going insane that their favorite version of the character was now out of the picture. My initial reaction, however, was...
It's gone. Yes, Mr. Frodo. It's over now.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of the MCU version of Peter Parker. Watch this vid for more info on that. So this news was kind of a godsend. Twitter has just been a hellhole of screaming
Hello, my dear.
about the topic of MCU Spidey for the past 2 years, and it always has felt like a bummer to be constantly on the negative side when it came to this interpretation. But let's break all of this down, and let me explain why I have a moderately positive outlook on this. First, we have all these MCU stans screaming it's time to boycott Sony, fire Sony, or even for Sony to get outright bought by Disney, which can I say is absolutely terrifying. First, they've bought one of the most time-worn studios in the history of film, 20th Century Fox, and now you want an even more ridiculous monopoly just because of a comic book character? Not to mention that Sony is an overseas corporation that couldn't be bought either way. Seriously, some of the people's devotion to the Disney brand is scary. Not to mention that a large part of the blame for Sony leaving the MCU lies on Disney. As the story goes, after Far From Home's success, Disney wanted a 50-50 share of the Spider-Man franchise going forwards, including the Venom spin-offs. This is 10 times the previous deal. Sony taking that would have been an objectively terrible idea for their entire studio, considering how important the Spider-Man IP is. What Sony wanted was a continuation of the previous deal. Disney said no, and now here we are. Another Spider-Man franchise shifted up because of corporate greed.
I don't know what's happening. I don't know. Hurry. I don't want to go. Sir, please.
Only this time isn't really Sony's fault. Now, I've heard the dumb argument that because Disney made the movies, it somehow made sense what they were asking for. But I mean, all the actual filmmakers were still paid. The actors, the writers, the director, the people who put hard work into crafting a film. Kevin was just there to make sure it still fit in to the overall scope of things, still getting producer credit. And they still got to put Spider-Man and Marvel team-up films. 3 of them, and Sony got nothing for it. This is just talking on a corporate level, the disgusting corporate level, where it's just a constant desire and greed for more and more money, playing tug-of-war with my favorite fictional character. But let's forget about the depressing financial stuff for a bit. Let's talk about what this might mean for the future of the character. Sony has still made my least favorite Spider-Man movie, Amazing Spider-Man 2. So possibly they could make something that's just as bad. But the 2 MCU Spider-Man movies are only a little bit above it and still solidly in the dislike pile. However, I genuinely like every other Spider-Man movie on some level, Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man included. So honestly, I feel optimistic now. Tom Holland is apparently still under contract for the movies, so we're not likely going to get another recast of the character, which is a good thing. Tom Holland has always felt wasted in the MCU. I felt intense potential to play a great Peter Parker from the second he showed up in Civil War, but honestly, I don't feel like they've capitalized on that since. Best I can figure, they're going to go with a soft reboot of sorts. Keep the same actor, but put him in an entirely different setting, or maybe start him off in college, stuff like that. In terms of if they'll continue the cliffhanger from Far From Home, I don't really know. Even though Sony has said they'll continue off of what Kevin set up, it still feels like something that's up in the air at this point. Also up in the air is all the side characters that are in these movies. Is Michelle Jones locked into the MCU after they got together at the end of the last movie? There were rumors floating about that all characters used in MCU Spider-Man films had to be changed slightly so that Disney wouldn't retain the film rights. I'm still unsure if that's true, but if it is, how is this to be changed? Would Michelle just be called Mary Jane, with Zendaya having red hair and a comic-accurate attitude or something? Also up in the air is the directing issue. Initial reports said that John Watts was still on board, but now it appears that only Holland is under contract. Could we get a legitimately exciting filmmaker involved? If so, that would be a rise in cautious optimism to downright hype from me. If Edgar Wright or Lord and Miller came out as the new directors, my euphoria would reach a state to where I could have my legs currently gnawed on by wolves, but I wouldn't care as long as I had seen an Edgar Wright Spider-Man movie. These open possibilities where creatives could run free is why I'm kind of happy right now. Sony can be really bad when they interfere, but they're often far more open to letting talented people be talented as opposed to Disney, who keeps a tight grip for the sake of quality control, which in turn often produces fine but unmemorable films. Sony feels more likely to gamble. Just look at Baby Driver, or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which they just distributed. Most of all, look at Spider-Verse, which genuinely was a work of art. Not to mention, they could just double down and get Sam Raimi back to do Spider-Man 4. I mean, it's not that likely, but oh my god, would that get me excited, and so many other people. Therefore, I feel like this might be a good thing. I'm really sorry if you're one of the people who deeply connected with MCU Spider-Man. I was honestly really jealous of you there for a while, saying I just could not get into him in any way. But all these possibilities opening just make me want to be an asshole and laugh at all the MCU stans crying into their Tom Holland body pillows. So until something happens to the contrary, I'm excited for more stuff. For me at least, Spider-Man has potential again. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below what's your opinion on this whole Spider-Man MCU Disney Sony debacle is. I have more thoughtful, less news-centric videos in the works, so if that sounds good, please subscribe to my channel if you feel sufficiently inclined.